to the Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas. My guest today is Kathy Wood. She is a professor emerita of sociology and women's studies at SIU Carbondale. She is a farmer and co-owner of La Colina Linda Farms. La Colina Linda Farms is an organic, bio-intensive farm and food forest. It is near Cobden, Illinois, in the heart of the Shawnee Hills. Stick around. I'd like to introduce her to you. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm trying to cool off. It's hot and humid here in Southern Illinois on the farm.
I wanted to ask you, how do you get into farming?
Well, I was looking to do something after I retired from being a sociology professor in 2012. And a woman I'd been doing community gardening with says, I've got an acre of land, and would you like to farm with me? And I said, yes. So I've been working with her on an acre of land since 2012. But this built on a lot of my life experiences of having a French intensive garden in the 80s in Carbondale, and then growing perennials in my yard. So my yard in Carbondale is full of perennial wildflowers.
Awesome. And
So,
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, what I was going to say was because we were working with her community garden for her technology center, we made it sure it was organic. So that was the other thing, was learning about being organic, seed starting, and raised beds.
Awesome. Now tell me about creating and maintaining an organic bio-intensive growing system, which is what you have on your farm, right?
Right. Well, one of the things it starts with is with our raised beds and what we call double dug beds, where we dig down about a foot and loosen the soil, and you add a lot of amendments to the soil. And we had to do that because it had been a pasture land, and there was it was all grasses. So and then you keep maintaining these beds, and they keep getting higher. Some people will do it with boards, but we didn't bring boards out there. So right now we have all these beds that are basically 4 feet wide and 20 feet long, and we keep adding supplements. And the beds just keep getting better and better. We add compost, and we leave the roots in, and so that's what we're doing with that. We don't use we only tilled one time, and that's the other part of it. Tillers kill worms, and they destroy the structure of the soil. So what we do is we use things called a broad fork, and we loosen the beds after we've had a crop in them, break up the clods, and use something called a tilther, which just has little tiny teeth on it, and work in the compost. And that's what we do. We this year we've gotten some irrigation, but we irrigate the beds. We use rainwater out there, but no chemicals. And then the other thing we've started doing is putting dark tarps over the beds when we get done with them, and that kills any weed pressure. And so we start our seeds in a grow room in Carbondale, and something called soil blocks, which have a lot of compost and mycorrhizal sorts of things, sand, and all that. And so we don't always plant seeds directly in the ground, but we put the growing plants and soil blocks in the ground. So we have these raised beds all over the farm. And we most recently we're doing something called a lasagna bed, vegan lasagna bed, of course. But we put cardboard down and got rid of the grass in the area, and we layered cardboard and compost and some soil. And right now, that basically we let the worms do the digging. So that broke down all the grasses, and so we can use the broad forks to make the raised beds instead of digging down deeply. So these are the variety of things we do to keep these biointensive beds going. So we're always growing soil. And right now there's just so many worms and good insects that are in them, and very happy beds.
What kind of crops do you grow there on your farm?
What we've been oriented primarily towards farmers market sorts of crops, and with our rotation. But because we have so much phosphorus in our soil, our root crops have been really good. So one of our leading crops is garlic, and you plant that in November. And we just pulled the garlic 2 weeks ago. And so it's so that's one of the things we grow, and we grow that raised bed so it overwinters. Some of the other crops that we grow, carrots, grow quite well. And if you've ever had a carrot that's been overwintered in a high tunnel, it's very sweet and quite wonderful. And we are just beginning to dig our organic potatoes. So these are just some of the things. We've had greens, sorrel, lettuces, those sorts of things that the harlequin bugs won't eat. So we've been picking that. We have beds of strawberries, and our blueberries and our blackberries are coming on big time. So these are just some of the other things we're growing. So we're branching out into berry production, so you don't have to use so much chemicals in the food forest. Okay. And last but not least, I am experimenting with a variety of greens that come from Europe, some plantains, salad greens, really, really good stuff like that, chicory, so that I can still get some nice greens and not have the bug pressure that we have. And then finally, Kelite. Are you familiar with Kelite?
No. What is that?
Okay, well, it is a seasonal wild green, and a lot of it was like chickweed and shepherd's purse. Right now, we are Kelite is a lot of lamb's quarter, and in Cobden, there's we've got the Taqueria Pequeña, and Concha, who's the main cook there, taught me about using lamb's quarter and purslane. And so we've been growing purslane. So a lot of what we're doing is looking at indigenous and Mexican wisdom in our food. So for us, Kelite was using the wild seasonal greens, starting with the earliest ones that you could have. And now we're more in the lamb's quarter, plantains, purslane. Okay. So that's the other thing that we're learning is from the people that we're around in Cobden, which has a large Mexican-American community, and working with that.
On another note, what about, can you talk to me a little bit about the lack of government subsidies and insurance for veggie growers versus commodity crops?
Yeah, well, this is one of the things we've discovered over the last few years when we've had droughts or we've had like heavy flooding rains. The good news about our raised beds and our biointensive growing is fortunately our beds are like sponges. And so if you're always having to till up your land, you have to wait until it's dry enough, and we don't have to wait. So we can, grow when other people have flooded fields. But if we have a drought or a bad weather event, we can't get crop insurance. Okay, and there's no guaranteed market for us. And so we're surrounded by commodity crops where people are growing soybeans and corn, and it's all GMO, lots of Roundup. More recently, some growers around us were using dicamba, and that is a bad pesticide or herbicide that drifts, and it was burning a lot of crops. So we saw a little damage of that, but we have no protection for that. So where other people are paid money not to grow crops, you don't get that in commodity market. So that's part of the thing is we just don't have the the sort of financial support for growers that commodity crops get,
Okay.
and all their chemicals and GMO.
So on a better side, now I know that you do some classes on growing plants, but you also do some cooking, vegan classes, don't you?
Yes, I have. And I hope to start that up again. And that's part of the problem with the COVID is right now you can't really, it's hard to have classes. Or what I'd like to do is have our farm to table meals so people can sample gourmet, vegan, organic food. And we're also gluten free, so we don't use any gluten in any of our cooking or baking. And so people really like our food. That was one way of teaching, and teaching people about how to grow and where to grow it and being on the farm, which you get much fresher food off the farm and buying it off the farm. I hope to return to teaching the cooking aspects of the classes, but I've developed baking, gluten-free baking, plant-based baking classes. So we've had that. So I hope to return to that sooner than later, but it's kind of hard to teach. So I may end up doing the video thing, such as you're doing, and that's one of the things in my lack of spare time. I'm thinking about developing my video presence.
There you go. That's what you have to do. Take it on to the virtual world.
Yeah, well, Mark Reinfeld would like me to do that, so we'll see about that.
Well, Catherine, thank you so very much, Kathy, for being on the show. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do, and I will have information about your La Colina Linda Farm on our webpage with links to your website, and see if anyone would like to order some stuff, they can do it online.
Yes, thank you. Mil gracias, and thank you for this time, and it's good to be with you. And best wishes for your programming. I look forward to seeing more programs.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching another episode of The Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, and check out our blog. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. Live vegan.